get some.
What's up, everyone? Welcome to TYT. I'm your host, Anna Kasparian, and we have a gigantic, just list of programming to get to today. Not only will we be doing the main show as we typically do. Obviously, tonight is the first GOP primary debate, and we will be doing special coverage of that. So after the main show, the debate will be taking place. We will be watching the debate closely, but not on the show for obvious copyright reasons. Once that debate is over, we'll be back on air to share the highlights of the debate with you and our analysis of it. So make sure you tune into that. In the main show today, I'll be joined by Mark Thompson in the second hour, which I'm really looking forward to. And in the first hour, there's a lot to get to in regard to updates on investigations pertaining to Donald Trump and all his cronies attempting to overturn the 2020 presidential election. We'll also talk about a different investigation that you probably haven't heard of. Leonard Leo, the guy who is, who's called Trump's court whisperer because he's the guy who succeeded in getting Trump to appoint the 3 conservative Supreme Court justices. He's also facing an investigation, not having to do with the election, but having to do with potentially using nonprofits to enrich himself. I'm really looking forward to sharing the details of that story with you as well. And as always, before we get to all of those stories, just want to encourage you to help support TYT by going to tyt.com/join to become a member. You can also become a member if you're watching us on YouTube by clicking that join button and joining us in that way. We're also gonna do special members only bonus coverage of the debate tonight as well. So members get all sorts of benefits for supporting us, but on top of everything, you help to support us and keep us free of corporate sponsorship or corporate influence, and I really appreciate that component of it more than anything else. With that said, let's get to our first story.
Donald's an idiot. Let me just be very clear when it comes to paying money. He is truly an idiot. He has not learned yet that the last person that you want, 3 people you don't want to throw under the bus like that: your lawyer, your doctor, and your mechanic. Because one way or the other, you're gonna go down the hill and there'll be no brakes.
Trump's allies and co-conspirators are starting to get real salty over the fact that Donald Trump is failing to provide any help with resources so they can fund their defense as they face indictments having to do with their efforts to overturn the 2020 presidential election. By the way, we've got some fun mugshots to get to later in this story, so stick around for that. But first, let's get to the details about what is currently happening, because the latest individual to come out swinging is Trump's former campaign lawyer, Jenna Ellis. You might remember her. She was going around doing press interviews alleging that there was widespread voter fraud, the election was stolen from Donald Trump, even though she, along with the other co-conspirators, failed to show a shred of evidence to prove that point. But nonetheless, on X, Jenna Ellis wrote the following: "I was reliably informed Trump isn't funding any of us who are indicted. Would this change if he becomes the nominee? Why then not now? I totally agree this has become a bigger principle than just one man. So why isn't MAGA Inc. funding everyone's defense?" Well, Jenna. I don't know how many times it was reported that Trump doesn't even pay his own lawyers, he doesn't pay his bills, guy went bankrupt 6 times. We didn't share stories like that just to insult Trump, although that was part of it as well. Those were factual stories about who Trump is and what his character says about the man. So the idea that he would help you after you have implicated yourself in this criminal case having to do with overturning the presidential election is laughable, to say the least. And yes, Jenna Ellis, along with others who surrounded Donald Trump and were part of these schemes to install fake electors, they have also been indicted in the Georgia case having to do with the attempts to overturn the presidential election. Now, some Trump allies have even resorted to things like crowdfunding in order to pay for their legal defenses. Some of those who face charges in Georgia have been released on bond agreements totaling as much as $100,000. And by the way, that's the low end of the scale when it comes to these bond agreements. Ellis, attorney John Eastman, and former Justice Department official Jeff Clark have launched crowdfunding pages where they are collecting donations for what is described as their respective legal defense funds. All three pages frame the beneficiaries as victims of politically motivated attacks. Let me just remind you all that there was literally a memo that was spread around by one of these co-conspirators that said fake electors, fraudulent electors. They knew they were fraudulent electors and described it as such in the memo, but they want you to believe that they are victims of a political witch hunt. Sure, okay. Now let's get to Rudy Giuliani, because this is the most fascinating part of this story, if you ask me. Now, Giuliani appears to be getting rather desperate in coming up with the funds necessary to pay for his own legal defense. In fact, he has listed his Manhattan apartment for sale, and he's looking for any way to, find the money necessary to avoid having to be represented by a public defender. And so Giuliani is facing some of the steepest debts as his cases pile up. Remember, it's not just the case having to do with overturning or attempting to overturn the presidential election. He's facing 2 criminal cases tied to January 6th, right? But on top of that, he's also facing 3 defamation lawsuits related to comments he made while seeking to overturn the election. That includes 2 former voting equipment companies that he lied about. So Dominion Voting Systems and Smartmatic are the 2 companies that are bringing defamation lawsuits against Giuliani and others. He's also facing disbarment proceedings in New York and Washington, and he needs to secure attorneys for that situation as well. And in recent proceedings in the cases, Giuliani's attorneys have noted his inability to pay for bills, as well as the apparent cutting off of assistance from Trump's PAC after it initially provided him with $400,000 this year to help cover the cost of preserving his records as evidence in court cases. And just check out this poor son of a bitch, as Jake would like to say, as he surrendered, as he was on his way to surrender in Georgia for his role in attempting to overturn the election.
I'm going to Georgia, and I'm feeling very, very good about it, because I feel like I'm defending the rights of all Americans, as I did so many times as a United States attorney. People like to say I'm different. I'm the same Rudy Giuliani that took down the mafia, that made New York City the safest city in America, reduced crime more than any mayor in the history of any city, anywhere. And I'm fighting for justice. I have been from the first moment. I represented Donald Trump, an innocent man who has now been proven innocent several times. I don't know how many times he has to be proven innocent. They have to be proven to be liars, actually enemies of our republic, who are destroying rights, sacred rights. They're destroying my right to counsel, my right to be a lawyer. They're destroying his right to counsel. It's not accidental that they've indicted all his lawyers. Never heard of that before in America.
Now, as goofy as Giuliani sounds there, and I will admit he sounds goofy as hell, what he's doing is he's trying to, in my opinion, mess with the jury pool, right? Because all you really need is one juror to be skeptical of these allegations, of this case, despite all of the evidence. And so what they do is they try to make their case, make their defense publicly. And that's what Rudy Giuliani, in my opinion, is doing right there. Because he's lying, right? Donald Trump has not stood trial over his attempts to overturn the 2020 presidential election yet. So when he says that Trump has been proven innocent over and over again, what is he referring to exactly? Is he referring to the impeachment proceedings in which he was impeached, but the Republican-controlled Senate refused to convict him of the impeachment charges. Is that what he's referring to? Now, he's never been charged, and nor have the co-conspirators in their efforts to overturn. They haven't stood trial, I should say, yet in their efforts to overturn the 2020 presidential election. So we'll see how it plays out. But I do want to show you how feeling really, really good looks like, because Giuliani's mugshot is essentially the largest broken window in American history. And I gotta share it with you. Here it is. So he had his mugshot taken along with the other co-conspirators, which we'll get to in just a moment. I'm gonna tease you with that. I wanna show you the mugshots in just a moment. But let's get back to Giuliani and what it could mean should Donald Trump fail to provide the resources that these individuals need for their defense. So just last week, CNN had reported that Giuliani traveled to Florida in April to ask Trump to help in covering his legal fees. Trump reportedly was not interested in that, which is no surprise. He's the kind of guy who doesn't really like to pay his bills. So someone coming to him, a loyalist, a lapdog coming to him asking for help in resources might have been laughable to him. And he later verbally agreed, allegedly, to help Giuliani with some of his bills without even committing to a specific amount. Now, Tim Parlatore, who is the individual who represented initially Donald Trump in the Mar-a-Lago case and also a Giuliani associate in the January 6th case, pretty much issued a thinly veiled threat to Trump during an interview. Here's what he said. He has no legal obligation to pay anybody's fees, but it's a good idea because here's what the Justice Department does. One of their standard tactics is to bleed the defendant and witnesses dry. And once they can bleed you dry to where all of your life savings have been sucked up by somebody like me, then you're far more pliable and willing to plead guilty to just about anything to stop the bleeding. So when you plead guilty, what does that usually mean? It means that you have taken a plea deal. And in that plea deal, you are cooperating with the investigation, with the prosecutors. And so this is his way of saying, yo, Trump, what are you doing? What are you doing? If you don't help them out, they're gonna talk, they're gonna fold. And he's not the only one making that case. Clearly, Trump's former attorney, Michael Cohen, agrees with this assessment. Let's watch.
Allegedly, from Rudy's own mouth, he claims that he has smoking gun information about Donald. Well, if that's true, I strongly suggest Rudy, and I don't have to suggest anything to Rudy. He's the one that basically came up with this concept of strong arming when he was the head of the Southern District of New York. He's gonna need to speak, and he's gonna need to speak before everybody else does.
You think Trump's making a mistake by not paying for more of Rudy Giuliani's legal fees?
Absolutely.
Absolutely. You don't pay for his legal fees, he's gonna talk. You want him to talk? I mean, I thought mobsters know how this stuff works, right? Okay, anyway. One little part of that interview with Michael Cohen that I couldn't help but want to share with you all is something very truthful that he said in regard to Giuliani's legal services and how questionable they were to begin with. Let's watch that.
What do you think about Rudy Giuliani? I mean, what we are told from our reporting is that he went down there with Bob Costello, his attorney, twice in late April. And I was told by sources, they basically told Trump it was in his best interest to pay for Rudy Giuliani's legal fees. He paid a small fee, but not the 7 figures that he's dealing with.
Or any of the money that Donald allegedly owed to Rudy from past performance, which again, it's not the job that Rudy did for Donald. I don't know if I would pay either, but at the end of the day, when your life is basically hanging on the line, once again, you just don't really want to throw another lawyer under the bus.
Look, it's not lost on me that Michael Cohen, who clearly is very salty about Donald Trump, this entire situation, spent time behind bars for being a lapdog for Donald Trump and essentially implicating himself in criminality in regard to the hush money payments, which Trump is now also indicted for in New York by Alvin Bragg. But it also seems that Trump is starting to get the message because the New York Times national correspondent Shane Goldmacher reported the following. He posted this on X. New, Trump will headline a $100,000 per person fundraiser for Rudy Giuliani's legal defense on September 7th. My colleagues, Maggie Haberman and Ben Protess, previously reported Trump had agreed to help attend Giuliani legal money fundraisers. And that's exactly what's gonna happen here. Apparently this is gonna take place at the Trump National Golf Club in Bedminster, New Jersey. And the idea that anyone would be willing to spend $100,000 just to sit for a roundtable discussion with Trump and Giuliani and share a meal with them at a fancy steakhouse blows my mind. But there are people out there who might do it. I'm curious to see how much money Giuliani is going to be able to raise from this effort. But when you look at the millions upon millions, tens of millions of dollars, that hundreds of millions of dollars actually, that Trump has been able to fundraise for himself, I can understand why he doesn't want to share that money with all of the co-conspirators who now have to defend themselves in court, because he's got his own legal fees and he's also running a presidential campaign. He doesn't want to expend all these resources to help his friends or people that he liked to use for his own purposes. But these people very likely do have dirt on Trump. And if he doesn't want them to fold, he's got to do right by them. But he doesn't do right by them. He doesn't do right by the many people that he persuaded and incited into rioting on the nation's capital on January 6th, 2021, of course. And I'm wondering what it's gonna take for people who like him, for people who believe in him, for people who support him, to actually see this man for who he is, to see this man for the lack of character that he demonstrates on a regular basis. Donald Trump demands loyalty from others, but he never practices loyalty toward anyone else. He doesn't feel the need to be loyal to anyone. He doesn't feel the need to stick his neck out and try to defend or root for anyone. Donald Trump looks out for Donald Trump. And if he's willing to do that to the people who are closest to him, to the people who have essentially served as loyalists to him for so long, what do you think he actually feels about the American people, the individuals who support him and vote him into office? Just something to think about, something to consider, right? Because I think that loyalty for some, including myself, by the way, is an important thing. I would do anything to protect my friends, my family, the people I love. Anyone who sticks their neck out for me, I've got their back. I think that shows character. And I know that among conservatives, loyalty, especially for the ones you love, especially for the ones who look out for you, is incredibly important. Just take a good hard look at who Trump is, how he treats those closest to him, including his own wife, by the way, and ask yourselves, is this the guy who has the character necessary to lead the country? I know some think he does, I just completely disagree. But let's take a look at the mugshots of people who believed in him and are now stuck with massive legal bills as they defend themselves in court in Georgia. Let's take a look at these mugshots. Let's just put them up. There you have Sidney Powell. Gotta say, I really do enjoy watching Sidney Powell, essentially get arrested, have her mugshot taken. I mean, she spread some of the most vicious, ridiculous lies, but there's more. We've got Jenna Ellis, who I don't know if she thought that this was a headshot situation rather than a mugshot situation, but she's smiling. Obviously not smiling when it comes to Trump's unwillingness to help with her legal expenses. And then John Eastman actually was the first to have his mugshot taken and released to the public. Now, Donald Trump is set to report to the Fulton County Courthouse tomorrow. And based on how Fani Willis has treated this situation and her unwillingness to provide any preferential treatment to these individuals, I think it's safe to say that we are going to see a Trump mugshot tomorrow. No promises, I don't know for sure, but she's not playing around. And honestly, I gotta respect that, because I do have a problem with how our criminal justice system treats the elites versus everyone else. I don't care if you are a member of Congress, I don't care if you're the president of the United States. Everyone should be treated equally based on the laws that we have. And if that district attorney in that courthouse is known for doing what they've been doing with these co-conspirators, having them, arrested, going through the bond agreements, taking the mugshots, making the mugshots public. They should treat everyone equally. There shouldn't be any preferential treatment. So we'll see what happens tomorrow. We'll see if they actually do release a mugshot of Donald Trump. But he is set to report to court. This is a very expensive legal defense that he's gonna have to deal with. And this is just one of the trials that he's gonna have to deal with. So we'll see how it all plays out. As always, we're gonna fill you in as we learn more. For now though, let's take a quick break. And when we come back, Mark Meadows gets thrown under the bus by a Mike Pence advisor. Don't miss it.
There was a big dump. I put out the big dump.
They knew and they let it happen.
Moonshine Dragon, I see you. I actually read your comment as I was doing that story and I wanted to like crack up, but it would have been in a really strange time. Anyway, here's what Moonshine Dragon says in our members section. Joke all you want, but Rudy's prepared to fight this all the way to the Supreme Courtyard by Marriott. A reference to the Four Seasons debacle that occurred after the election. The throat goat dragon writes in and says, Sidney Powell looks like the owl after he gets to the center of a Tootsie Pop. Hey, don't be insulting to that very cute cartoon owl, okay? We've got Uriah Heep who says, I never forget Rudy's lies to the 9/11 responders who worked in the pit without any respirators or any other protections, causing most of these brave souls to lose their lives due to various illnesses. Truly disgusting. You know what, great thing to bring up. I think a lot of people do forget these things, like the 24-hour news cycle or short attention spans. It's easy to forget some of the just unbelievable cruelty that some of these individuals engaged in well before Trump even ran for president. We've got the infamous Mr. Joy Boy who says, oh dear, Jenna's been drinking the Kool-Aid again. No, silly girl. The Kool-Aid is for the MAGA chumps who send Trump their paychecks. Look, as you guys know, I'm trying really hard not to be insulting to ordinary people, right? And I just want to always be cognizant. And I'm not trying to like preach to you or anything like that or lecture you. But just be aware and cognizant of how many lies have been fed to people in like far right media, OAN, Newsmax, for a long time Fox News until they got sued by Dominion and ended up paying one of the biggest defamation settlements in American history, right? Like those lies seep into people's minds and they just don't have any, I don't want to say access, they do have access to the truth. But the way the media works and the way algorithms work, they just get fed lies over and over and over again. And they genuinely think that Trump is the target of a political witch hunt. And by the way, I want to be clear, is there a political component to this by Democrats? Yes, but the evidence speaks for itself, right? Like the evidence clearly shows that they were trying to overturn the presidential election knowing full well that they had lost and that Biden had won. You know, another piece of evidence that I think is pretty damning, they had no pending litigation in the state of New Mexico, meaning that they didn't challenge the election results through the courts in New Mexico, but they installed fake electors in New Mexico anyway. That tells you something. All right, we gotta get back to the show. See you there. everyone. Special thanks to Dave Schmidt 311 for gifting 2 tier 1 subs to TYT's community on Twitch. We really appreciate you, as we appreciate all of our viewers and our supporters. You guys are amazing. But with that said, let's get to our next story, because don't you just love it when these right-wing grifters start fighting with one another? Because that's exactly what's happening with a Trump advisor and Mark Meadows.
Mark was a ringleader of much of the events that happened around January 6th. He was somebody who was the president sought to find additional attorneys who gave advice different than White House counsel.
That was Mike Pence's campaign advisor, Mark Short. He was also the chief of staff for Mike Pence during the Trump administration, just throwing Trump's former chief of staff, Mark Meadows, under the bus. Now, Meadows has not been indicted in the federal case pertaining to the attempts to overturn the 2020 presidential election. However, he is one of the co-conspirators who has been indicted in the Georgia case having to do with attempts to overturn the 2020 presidential election. And what's interesting is how Short is not only throwing him under the bus, but making some pretty strong allegations against Meadows. And it makes me wonder, why wasn't he indicted in the federal case? I might have an answer for that. But first, let's watch more from Short.
There had been a lot of conversations leading up to this, and Mark was central to pulling together many of those who were, I think, whispering falsehoods into the president's ear. And so I think that when you look at the federal indictment and he's not in it, I think it is others on your previous panel question whether or not there's been involvement from Mark with the special counsel's office.
There's involvement with Mark and the special counsel. Like, definitely, I think Mark Meadows is cooperating with special counsel Jack Smith in the federal case. And the reason why I believe that is because A, he has not been indicted, and B, there have been some reports kind of percolating showing that he is saying things that contradict Donald Trump's defense. Certainly in the story that we covered recently having to do with Trump's handling of classified documents, we shared with you that Mark Meadows told Jack Smith that Trump never ordered those documents to be declassified. And again, that contradicts Trump, which tells me, or at least gives me and others a hint that he is in fact cooperating. But the situation in Georgia is different because Fani Willis did in fact indict Mark Meadows in that case. And it is interesting to see the kind of maneuvering he's engaging in or attempting to engage in order to essentially get to a place of immunity in that case. So as I said, Meadows is indicted in Georgia, and what he's trying to do is move that case to the federal courts. So far, 3 of the 19 defendants in the Georgia case or in the Georgia indictments have filed to move their case to the federal court, and that includes Mark Meadows. Also includes Jeffrey Clark, who's a former Justice Department official, and David Schaefer, a fake elector and former Georgia Republican Party chairman. So why do these 3 want to move their Georgia indictment to the federal courts? Well, get this, Meadows' attorneys, first off, have opposed any attempt to delay his August 28th hearing on this, so the other co-defendants can basically have their arguments heard simultaneously. He's like, no. I'm not with them. August 28th, I'm supposed to have my day to make my case to move this to the federal courts. I don't want anything to change. So they're kind of all throwing each other under the bus, which is kind of hilarious. Trump, who plans to surrender Thursday, meaning tomorrow, already tried a similar tactic in another state level indictment he's facing. The former president previously attempted to move his hush money criminal case in New York to federal court, but a judge rejected the bid. Trump is now appealing that decision. Now, Trump's efforts are clear, and what's motivating him, in my opinion, is also clear. First off, if Donald Trump happens to win the Republican nomination and wins another term as president, he would not be able to pardon himself in the Georgia investigation because he doesn't have the ability or the jurisdiction to do so when it comes to the state charges. However, it's a different story when it comes to federal court. So his motivations here, in my opinion, are pretty clear. But let's talk about the co-defendants here. Let's talk about Meadows and others who want to move their Georgia indictment to federal court. Why do they want to do it? Well, the first reason has to do with immunity. How does this work? Meadows is trying to move his Georgia case to federal court, arguing that he is immune because the allegations against him, his trip to Georgia following the 2020 election, and calls he organized between Trump and election officials was part of his job in the White House. So just to shed a little more light on what his role was, remember that damning phone call that Donald Trump made to Brad Raffensperger, the Secretary of State of Georgia, basically demanding that he find enough votes to change the election results from the state going to Biden to instead going to Trump? Well, it turns out that Mark Meadows, his chief of staff at the time, was on the phone call as that conversation happened. And he was also putting Trump in charge with attorneys who were spouting off about this fake elector scheme, trying to convince Trump to go along with it, allegedly. Now, in court filings, Meadows' lawyers argued that nothing Mr. Meadows is alleged in the indictment to have done is criminal per se. Okay, arranging Oval Office meetings, contacting state officials on the president's behalf, visiting a state government building, and setting up a phone call for the president. One would expect a chief of staff to the president of the United States to do these sorts of things. But there is a catch here, because legal experts say there is a difference between Meadows' duties as chief of staff in conducting official White House business versus what he was engaging in helping Trump out with his campaign to be president of the United States. There's a distinction there. One of the people making that argument is Jeffrey Cohen from Boston College Law School. He made that argument. I think that's a pretty decent argument. So we'll see whether or not Meadows is gonna have his way in getting his case moved from the state of Georgia to the federal courts. Now, the other reason why Meadows would want to do this is because of the jury pool. Apparently, they are hoping that the federal courts would have a far more favorable jury pool to select from. Legal experts note a federal trial would be heard by a different judge and a jury pool less filled with Democrats than one in the Georgia Fulton County. In Georgia, for instance, the jury pool would be selected from Fulton County, home to its capital city of Atlanta, which President Biden carried by 47 percentage points in 2020. But head out toward the suburbs, and a trial in federal court would lessen that advantage. Biden won the area covered by the US District Court for the Northern District of Georgia by only 7 percentage points, and the court's Atlanta division by 32 points in 2020, according to a review of state election data. But that doesn't even matter, because they don't want the case to be heard in Georgia. Again, they want to move this to federal court because they do think that they'll have a better chance at a jury pool that's a little more empathetic toward Donald Trump and his co-defendants. Now, reason 3, less humiliation, okay? Because the trial would not be televised or streamed in the federal courts. But the Fulton County Court, they stream their trials, and they don't like that. I don't blame them, I wouldn't like it either, pretty embarrassing. The mugshots coming out, pretty embarrassing. And what I've seen from Fani Willis so far, the Fulton County District Attorney, is that she's not playing around. No preferential treatment. These co-defendants are being treated similar to other individuals who stand trial in Fulton County, Georgia. And so they don't want to deal with that streaming. They don't want to deal with it being televised. Maybe they saw, how the whole Amber Heard situation played out, and they don't want to be embarrassed. So they want to move the case. I don't know if it's going to play out the way that they're hoping. But again, August 28th, Mark Meadows is supposed to have this hearing, and we'll see what the outcome of that hearing will be. But really, really interesting to see how this is playing out in Georgia versus the federal case by special counsel Jack Smith. All right, let's now move on to an entirely different investigation, not having to do with, not having to do with Donald Trump and the 2020 election per se, but this certainly does have to do with someone who is closely tied to Trump, friendly with Trump, but it's a completely different matter. So let's get into it.
This IRS document obtained by CNN is evidence of the largest anonymous dark money political donation ever reported. $1.6 billion. It is, according to experts, a staggering amount.
I am just stunned. We are talking about income that is many multiples larger than the largest dark money groups ever found.
And it's going to a new organization called Marble Freedom Trust. While you've probably never heard of it or the man in charge of it, the whole country is familiar with his work. His name is Leonard Leo, a devout Catholic known as Donald Trump's Supreme Court whisperer.
You know, every once in a while, journalists do such a good job that it spurs some pretty serious investigations. And in this particular case, Donald Trump's so-called court whisperer, Leonard Leo, is now facing an investigation by the DC Attorney General after Politico put out a report indicating that he might be enriching himself through his nonprofits. Now, how did he do that? I'm gonna lay out the case in just a moment, but understand that Leonard Leo had a tremendous amount of influence on the Trump administration and, more importantly, the Supreme Court. So this man's influence will impact this country and our lives for decades to come. He is the person who handpicked the 3 conservative Supreme Court justices that were confirmed during the Trump administration. He might not be as, I guess, attention grabbing as some of the other Trump cronies, but this guy, again, very well funded and has had a big impact on the country. So let's get into the details of what Politico was able to uncover through their investigation. So back in March of this year, Politico reported that one of Leo's so-called charities, called the 85 Fund, paid his for-profit company tens of millions of dollars in the 2 years since he joined the company, okay? So let's get to that excerpt by Politico. The Leo-aligned nonprofit, the 85 Fund, which is registered as a tax-exempt charity, paid tens of millions of dollars to a public relations firm in Virginia, which Leo co-chairs in the 2 years since he joined the firm, known as CRC Advisors, okay? So this dark money gets funneled to the charity, the 85 Fund. And then the 85 Fund starts making these massive payments to the tune of tens of millions of dollars to for-profit companies that Leonard Leo is the head of. Now, an important thing to keep in mind is that Leonard Leo actually lived a very modest lifestyle up until 2016. Just keep that in mind as I continue laying out this case. So Politico reported that a total of $43 million flowed to Leo's company over 2 years, and that the bulk of it came from the 85 Fund, a nonprofit run by his allies, which has spent tens of millions of dollars over the past decade to promote Trump's Supreme Court picks, file briefs before the court, and more recently used an alias to push for voting restrictions and accuse Democrats of cheating in the 2020 election. Yeah. He's that guy. So beginning in 2016, his lifestyle changed quite a bit, okay? Over the 2 decades before he became Trump's so-called judge whisperer or court whisperer, Leo had maintained a largely middle-class lifestyle, okay? Directing one of Washington, D.C.'s many nonprofit organizations. He was associated with the Federalist Society, hence his handpicking of conservative Supreme Court justices. But since 2016, things changed. Politico writes that since 2016, however, his recent wealth accumulation has included 2 new mansions in Maine, 4 new cars, private school tuition for his children, hundreds of thousands of dollars in donations to Catholic causes, and a wine buyer and locker at Morton's Steakhouse, which I didn't even know was a thing, because I don't enrich myself through phony nonprofits and charities. But nonetheless, I will continue laying out this case. So what happened next? Well, Politico's reporting sparked an investigation from a watchdog group. And it turns out that the amount of money that was funneled from the 85 Fund to his for-profit companies for advisors and all that much, much higher than Politico had previously found. So a campaign for accountability complaint alleges the total amount of money that flowed from Leo-aligned nonprofits to his for-profit firms was actually $73 million over 6 years, beginning in 2016. Listen, how are you gonna argue that this scheme didn't happen to enrich Leonard Leo when Leonard Leo's lifestyle very obviously changed from normal middle-class dude to a guy who now has like multiple mansions, multiple cars, has a locker and a wine buyer at Morton's Steakhouse? Like, this is the thing about, like, he hasn't been convicted of anything, okay? So I'll say potential criminal. But this is the thing about potential criminals like Leonard Leo. They're stupid. Because if you are potentially breaking laws to enrich yourself, maybe don't be an idiot and buy multiple mansions and multiple cars immediately after you begin enriching yourself. I mean, it's unbelievable, but I'll continue. So the complaint by the Campaign for Accountability, which covers the period between 2016 and 2020, reads as follows. There are questions as to whether Leo-affiliated nonprofits have diverted substantial portions of their income and assets directly or indirectly to the personal benefit of Leonard Leo. Such payments were generally listed as made in exchange for alleged consulting. That's my personal favorite. Everyone's a consultant, right? Everyone. Consulting, research, public relations, or similar services. However, CFA, okay, that's the Campaign for Accountability, has reasonable questions about whether those alleged services are actually rendered at all, or if services were rendered, whether the payments made were substantially in excess of fair market value. I mean, I don't know. I actually have a good friend who is a consultant, like an actual consultant who helps to consult with media organizations and all of that. He's not paid tens of millions of dollars for his consulting work. He's paid handsomely. Not tens of millions of dollars for it though. And the news of the investigation comes as that nonprofit, now that was the subject, this is my favorite part. As that nonprofit, which is the subject of this investigation, just quietly relocated from Virginia to Texas. Now, why would they do that? Could it be that Texas has incredibly weak laws regulating nonprofits? Could it be? I don't know, let me give you the details. In discontinuing the group in the state of Virginia, the new address listed is a virtual office suite in Fort Worth, Texas, shared by a 2 men and a truck franchise. The office building advertises virtual and co-working spaces. Now, things get even more shady. Get a load of this. Politico reports that in Texas, a new registration for the 85 fund was filed on June 27th under yet a different address in a different city than the one listed on the Virginia paperwork. It is also registered in Texas as a nonprofit entity. This location is a UPS store in a strip mall next door to a restaurant called the Snooty Pig Cafe. Snooty Pig indeed. Okay, now the 85 fund switch again from Virginia to that Fort Worth office building comes days after Politico inquired on June 30th about certain Leo allies who may have personally benefited from millions in anonymous donations that moved through the 85 fund over the past decade. So this is the dark money going to the nonprofit and then getting funneled to Leonard Leo and his friends, okay? Moving to Texas makes sense if laws pertaining to nonprofits have been broken. Texas has limited regulations when it comes to charities, making it a more attractive legal environment for nonprofits that are looking to potentially funnel money to private companies and enrich certain individuals. And again, this is not unprecedented. A good example of this happening is when the NRA, the National Rifle Association, moved to Texas after they were facing multiple lawsuits from attorneys general in New York and Washington, D.C. Now, a number of the groups that receive contributions from Leo's dark money network in turn hold sizable contracts with his firm, CRC Advisors. This includes the Federalist Society, the nation's preeminent conservative debating society where Leo was executive vice president and still serves as co-chairman. And among payments, the complaint flagged to the IRS and DC Attorney General is $3.1 million, which the Federalist Society paid to CRC between 2020 and 2021 for media training. I mean, I'll train anyone in media training. If you're gonna pay me $3.1 million, I'll be the best trainer in the world. But here's the thing, media trainers, I don't even know if that's a thing, but if it is, they're not getting paid $3.1 million for their services. I can guarantee that. Now, this whole situation might explain why Leonard Leo is such an advocate for dark money in politics. He loves it, he can't get enough of it. In fact, he doesn't do many interviews, but he did agree to sit down and speak to a conservative podcast called Main Wire. And during that conversation, he decided to talk about how, look, he's a lightning rod for criticism. He doesn't really get it. Doesn't get why he gets criticism for being such a fierce advocate for dark money in politics. Leo spoke about the long history of dark money in US politics. Quote, "It's not to hide in the shadows," he said. "It's because we want ideas judged by their own moral and intellectual force." Right. I mean, he should tell that to the DC Attorney General investigating his potential, self-enrichment through this charity. I'm sure it'll go over well. I'm sure that, they'll buy this argument and this defense. We'll see. But the idea that dark money has been a mainstay in American politics since the beginning is ridiculous. And if dark money has done anything to this country, it has undermined our voice as ordinary Americans engaging in our democratic process. It has undermined our democracy. It has allowed for all sorts of shady behavior to take place and corrupt the halls of Congress with this disgusting money that, again, is obviously doled out for reasons that do not benefit ordinary Americans. So when you take a step back and you look at the policies that get enacted, when you look at the politicians who refuse to look out for the best interests of their own constituents, when you ask yourself, why is it that there seems to be a lot more agreement among Democratic lawmakers and Republican lawmakers when it comes to policies that enrich and benefit big business? Dark money's got a lot to do with it. Money in politics in general has a lot to do with it. And Leonard Leo loves it, he jumps in it. So we'll see how this case plays out, but I thought it was important to share it with you because dark money does more than just corrupt our politicians. Oftentimes it allows for shady figures to enrich themselves through so-called nonprofits. All right, we gotta take a break. When we come back, we've got more news for you, including, pretty sick system we're dealing with when private health insurers provide health care to people in prison. You gotta take a look at what this actually looks like in practice. It is unbelievably cruel. I gotta share the details, so come right back. We'll do just that when we return. Welcome back to the show, our social break. Man, a lot of comments to get to. Just want to say thank you to everyone who has become a member just today. Everyone who has gifted membership. New members include Leaf Dude, Avante Bellardo, Scott Nurlun, I hope I'm saying your name correctly, Craig Hubbard, Loretta Andak, John Henry, JG, Lindsay Munn, Erica Dickerson, Feeble Bastard, and Eric Radke. You guys are amazing. Thank you so much for supporting the show and becoming members. We are gonna have an incredible bonus episode today. We're also gonna have extra debate coverage that's members only after we have, our free for everybody coverage and analysis of the debates. All right, Chris Birch, who's been a member for 9 months, writes in and says, happy debate night, TYT fam. Thanks for 9 months of kick-ass progressive news, good and bad. You are one of a kind, Casper. Thank you for being you. Looking forward to all the great content tonight. Keep up the great work. Chris, we love you and we love hearing from you. Thank you for your comments. Thank you for your support. We really appreciate you. Soul Life writes in and says, bada bing capiche, reference to the Michael Cohen impression I did. I have to say, I'm never gonna be a fan of Michael Cohen. Like, I get it, he turned on Trump, everyone wants to celebrate that, and I commend him for doing that. But I love hearing him talk just because I love his accent. It's so much fun. And by the way, I genuinely love the accent. I'm not making fun of it, I enjoy it. We've got Ames writing in saying, watch, Trump will keep 75% of the money raised at Rudy Giuliani's fundraiser. Oh my God, we gotta follow up on that. I don't think you're wrong, okay, so we'll see. Sarah Leela says, it's so real. Those lives have pretty much fed delusions. My parents legitimately think Donald Trump is a good person. Sarah, thank you for sharing that with us because it is real. It's so real. And don't discount the political cults that people are in. And I don't think that it's just the MAGA crowd. Go out of your way to consume perspectives, listen to ideas, listen to points of view that are different from your own. Doesn't mean you're gonna agree with them. You might just vehemently disagree, but it's important to have your beliefs and your perspectives challenged. I think it actually makes you stronger, it makes you smarter, it makes you sharper, and you might be missing something, right? There might be a good point made by someone who's a centrist or a moderate, or yes, even a conservative, that you just don't have a lot of, you're not getting from partisan media. So just wanted to give that advice. I think that it's actually really helpful to do it. Let's get back to the show. Welcome back to the show, everyone. Just wanted to give a shout out to all the wonderful people who have been writing in, including the super chat community or those in our YouTube community commenting through super chats. Toxic Monster says, keep up the good work. I love the members only video yesterday, very heartfelt and inspirational. I'm really happy to hear that you feel that way. So if you're a member and you didn't catch that, you can always go to our archives and watch. And if you want to become a member, tyt.com/join is the way to do it, or you can click that join button if you're watching us on YouTube. Jay from New Jersey says, Deep Dive Wednesdays are the reason why I'm a member. Keep up the good work, even when I disagree. God, I appreciate you so much. As for Trump's lawyers, they should be called friends without benefits. Yeah, that's actually true. There are no benefits. They might think there are benefits, but they're short-lived, to say the least. And Stinky Feet says, Anna, I heard that Trump has possibly already violated the terms of the Fulton County bond to not intimidate anyone literally within hours of the order by posting on Truth Social. I read about that as well. We'll see how that plays out. But Trump, he's his own worst enemy. He doesn't know how to shut up. He doesn't know how to stop essentially implicating himself in various potential crimes. And I'm sure if his lawyers had their way, they would get him to stop talking publicly about this situation, but they can't control him. No one can control him. He can't control himself. So again, he's his own worst enemy. And if he wants to implicate himself, have at it. But Fani Willis, as I said earlier, she's not playing around. She is strong to say the least, and she's going forward full steam ahead. All right, let's move on to something different. I wanted to talk a little bit about the treatment of inmates, especially when it comes to the health care that's being provided to them. The story is difficult to get through. It's hard to share the details with you all, but it's an important story to talk about, so let's get to it.
Correctional health care is a unique field with unique challenges. Caregivers serve a distinct patient population that may have very little or no access to health care. Day in and day out, we strive to meet the healthcare needs of our patient population.
Do you? Do you? The answer is no. They did not do anything that was just listed in that ridiculous promotional video. Who is they? Well, Corizon Health, one of the nation's largest private healthcare providers for prisons. Look, we've got issues with private healthcare. We do. We all know it. You know it, I know it, the American people know it. But imagine private healthcare in the context of prison and how bad that is. Well, if you can't imagine it, I'm about to tell you, because there are now lawsuits against Corizon Health over the way that they have been treating inmates, the healthcare practices they've engaged in, the malpractice allegations that have come up in recent years. And they're engaging in what can only be described as a bankruptcy fraud scheme. It's known as the Texas two-step. I can't wait to share the details of that in just a moment. But first, let's talk about the lawsuits. Let's talk about their alleged wrongdoing, and then we'll get to how they're trying to skirt responsibility for it. So among the lawsuits is the case of Hector Garcia, an inmate who died just days after arriving at a jail in New Mexico because medical staff employed by this private healthcare company allegedly failed to give him the proper care, the care he needed to survive. So he collapsed, and when a corrections officer found him, he was crawling on the floor, vomiting and moaning in pain. But his requests for medical care were allegedly ignored. So I'm gonna pause for a second because the corrections officer should be investigated too, right? So the healthcare company that we're talking about, that's the main focus of this story. But there is an issue with the way inmates are treated, right? We're supposed to have constitutional protections against cruel and unusual punishment. You have an inmate crawling on the floor, vomiting, okay, showing signs that he's suffering from internal bleeding, and his call for medical help completely ignored. Okay, so the next day, Garcia collapsed again. "Help me," he yelled, describing his pain as a 10 out of 10. Video footage obtained by insiders shows him wriggling on the ground in agony before corrections officers and medical staff assist him into a wheelchair. Now, the next morning, Corizon staff finally, okay, literally the next day, they finally sent him to a hospital. But sometime during the ride, Garcia went into cardiac arrest, and the next day he was dead. Garcia's family filed their lawsuit in 2021, and they joined what was at least, get a load of this, 475 active suits alleging medical negligence over Corizon's healthcare practices at jails and prisons across the country. So, but Garcia's lawsuit and all the others have now been stayed. So this is the update to the lawsuits that should infuriate everyone, anyone who cares about justice in this country. The company split and filed for bankruptcy in, again, what's referred to as a controversial maneuver known as the Texas two-step. Before we get to that, let's dive a little bit deeper into the background of this company and the allegations against it, okay? So from 2011 to 2016, Corizon faced tons of allegations of substandard care, okay, and also malpractice. They claim to offer premium healthcare, but critics say that the company actually repeatedly cut corners to do what? To maximize their profits. Like at the end of the day, this is a private company. They're gonna wanna maximize their profits, and if they're going to do that, they're gonna cut corners, especially in the context of prison, in the context of providing healthcare to prisoners. I mean, just take a step back and think about that for a moment. Unfortunately, there isn't a lot of empathy toward inmates. And as a result, these private companies can come in and make money off of them, abuse them. I mean, we've done stories about various companies that allow for these inmates to make collect calls to their loved ones. And they charge an insane amount of money per minute just to essentially rip off the inmates' family members who want to talk to their loved one, you know? Now, with that said, in 2013, Corizon told a Florida news outlet the company had been a defendant in 660 malpractice lawsuits over the previous 5 years. In 2015, Corizon lost a $154 million contract with New York City. 4 years later, it lost a $200 million contract with Arizona. A New York State panel found Corizon's treatment so incompetent and inadequate as to shock the conscience. And a woman named Madeline Pitkin even died of dehydration in an Oregon jail under the care of Corizon. This happened in 2014 after 4 requests for medical help or care were ignored. A former Corizon employee who worked at that jail talked to Al Jazeera about the company's practices and shed some light about the abuse and malpractice. Let's take a look at that.
I was concerned for my medical license. There were several times when we had some pretty near misses. Nice to meet you. And it really scared me.
She quit less than a year before Madeline's death because she was concerned about the company's quality of care. This is the first time she's spoken publicly. What was it like working for Corizon then?
So they were hiring people who were right out of school. They were chronically understaffed. So the people that were there were undertrained, and they would pressure me to connect with the correctional department and get the patient released as soon as they had a major medical problem, which sometimes did happen. From my recollection, if they were released before the ambulance got there, then Corizon was not on the hook for their medical bill. And so they would quick try to expedite their release.
How did they respond to your concerns?
Corizon's response was to retaliate against me.
She ended up leaving her job with Corizon because she has a conscience and she saw that their practices were disgusting. She didn't agree with them. And when she, as she mentioned there, as she voiced her concerns about how they were treating inmates, they decided to retaliate. I mean, it's just, we've seen this situation play out over and over again in different contexts, so I'm not surprised. But it is disgusting when you see this case and it's just it's a microcosm of something that I find so disgusting. The idea that profits matter more than human lives, right? This company, based on my read of this story, the hundreds of lawsuits, everything that I've consumed about this issue, just tells me that they saw an opportunity to take advantage of a massive group of people in the country, by the way, who are behind bars, who don't get much empathy from communities outside these prisons. And so they think let's make money off these people. Why not? I mean, who's gonna stick up for them? Who's gonna look out for them? That's the sense I get here, because this has been going on for so long. This isn't something that just started this year or a month ago. This has been going on for years, for decades. Now, the allegations from inmates continued. Tracy Grissom filed a complaint in 2019 saying she was forced to live in her own feces for 4 months after Corizon contractors at the Alabama prison where she was held failed to provide a properly fitted ostomy bag. Adri Edmo, a transgender prisoner, filed a claim in 2017 saying she attempted suicide after Corizon providers in an Idaho prison denied her gender-affirming care. But right now, all of those suits, all of those hundreds of lawsuits have been stayed, they've been halted, thanks to a sly legal maneuver. Now we're gonna get to the Texas two-step. Let's talk about that. So Texas law allows corporations to essentially split into multiple corporate entities and divide the corporate assets and liabilities. Okay, so that's step one in the so-called Texas two-step. A recent example of that was Johnson & Johnson. They actually engaged in this practice after they were facing lawsuits and legal claims over its talcum powder causing cancer. And here's more on how the Texas two-step works.
This law enables what has become known as the Texas two-step, a means by which corporations can avoid liability by strategic use of bankruptcy laws. The Texas two-step works by converting an existing company into a Texas corporation and then engaging in a divisive merger, This allows the corporation to split into multiple corporate entities and to allocate the assets and liabilities of the original corporation between the newly created entities. A corporation looking to limit its liability can allocate corporate liabilities to one of the newly created corporations, the so-called bad co, while dedicating the greater part of corporate assets to the other new entity, the good co. The Texas two-step is completed by the bad co filing for Chapter 11 bankruptcy. This puts on hold the pending lawsuits filed against the original corporation, inherited by the now bankrupt bad co, while the other surviving corporation, good co, operates the business with its assets shielded from recovery.
Sounds a little like what Alex Jones did after he lost in the defamation suit having to do with the Sandy Hook victims. Now, what you just saw in that video is exactly what Corizon is doing. Okay, so a group of investors bought out the company in 2021 and within months created a new company called YesCare, home to most of Corizon's valuable assets, including hundreds of millions of dollars in taxpayer-funded contracts with prisons and jails. In April of 2022, Corizon changed its incorporation from Delaware to Texas for obvious reasons. Then the liability-laden Corizon was renamed T-Hum, weird name, T-Hum. And in February of this year, it filed for bankruptcy. So they did the Texas two-step to a T. According to its financial statements, the company that's now filing for bankruptcy has transferred tens of millions of dollars to entities some of its investors control. So the investors are like, we're good, okay, because now, those assets have been transferred over to the good company, YesCare. The investors get to protect their investment, and the renamed Corizon, T-Hum, files for bankruptcy, and they get to skirt any of their financial obligations pertaining to these lawsuits. And so it describes an alleged meeting. By the way, the goal of Corizon's two-step may have been exposed even more clearly in a recent civil complaint. So it describes an alleged meeting in which T-Hum director Isaac Lefkowitz says the Texas two-step can be used to force plaintiffs into accepting lower settlements. A former Corizon CEO, James Hyman, who sued YesCare over his 2021 ouster from the company, described the planned two-step in his lawsuit as an old-fashioned bankruptcy fraud scheme. By the way, YesCare has denied the claim of fraud. But look, the implications of this ongoing battle are huge because Corizon's two-step would avoid a much wider range of liabilities than the previous companies who've used it. Like this is the important thing. Even if you're the kind of person who doesn't care about how prisoners are treated. I obviously disagree with you. I think that's wrong and immoral, but I'm not gonna force my morality on you. But consider what this particular case means for all the other corporations, all the other private businesses who want to engage in mistreating people, abusing people, and then want to skirt any financial liability after they're sued. They can take advantage of this as well. They can do the exact same thing. In fact, this has happened with other corporations. So if you're victimized by one of these big companies, these major corporations, and you have a suit with merit, you have the evidence, you want to sue them, and you want the situation to be made right with a payment of some sort, right? They can just do the Texas two-step. If you're part of a class action lawsuit, they could just do the Texas two-step. If the company succeeds, it provides a roadmap for eliminating virtually any unsecured liability owed by any corporate entity, regardless of whether that entity is solvent. Ian Cross, a Michigan civil rights attorney who represents multiple prisoners who have sued Corizon, wrote in a procedural objection in April. And on top of that, if Corizon prevails, the malpractice suits against the company could be settled for pennies on the dollar, along with 44 employment lawsuits over allegations including discrimination, wage theft, and wrongful termination, and at least $88 million in claims such as unpaid invoices for medical providers, according to bankruptcy filings. All of these issues, all of these loopholes, that are meant to provide cover for bad behavior by corporations, impacts all of us, every single one of us. And so when the justice system is skewed in favor of bad actors in the corporate world, don't think that it has no impact on you. It absolutely does. And Corizon is just the latest example of a company taking full advantage of it. All right, we got to take a break. I'm massively over time, but Mark Thompson will join me for the second hour of the show. Don't miss it.
There was a big dump. I put out the big dump.
They knew, and they let it happen.
The rest of the news media says you should not fight for positive change. If you do, you're not really a reporter or a journalist, because reporters and journalists don't care what happens. I don't agree. That's not written anywhere. That's not a law. It's just a rule that they invented so that reporters didn't actually challenge the people that are in power. Well, we don't agree with that. We think we should challenge the people in power, that actually makes you a better journalist, not a worse one.
Everywhere you look, things are getting more expensive. Here at TYT, we understand this. That's why we're not gonna price gouge you or use inflation as an excuse to raise our prices. A TYT membership is not your typical subscription, but basic membership is still just $4.99. So what do you get for that price? For starters, you're getting exclusive programming, unique, exclusive designs from Shop TYT, access to a members-only chat, giveaways, emojis, and so many other amazing perks. But most importantly, you're helping to make an impact. As a TYT member, you not only help us do the shows every day, but you drive real positive change in the process. In 2017, we helped to start Justice Democrats right here on TYT. That's a group that got a dozen progressives elected into Congress. That's amazing, you did that. Your support also funds TYT's very own investigative reporting. Just recently, our reporters exposed the Fellowship Foundation and pressured lawmakers into boycotting that bigoted event. Isn't that amazing? We raised over $30,000 for Jackson, Mississippi, and delivered clean water to thousands of people in need. Our petitions, polls, and community of activists help keep the corruption of Washington in check. That's the impact of what just $4.99 a month from our members can do. And we're just getting started. Positive change doesn't occur overnight, but with your contribution, we can make it happen together.
I got pulled in. They told me, hey, listen, Cenk, we're insiders. We are the establishment. People in Washington tell me that they're concerned about your tone. We think that there's a better role for you, and it's not in 6 o'clock. The problem with the mainstream media is they're desperate to get access. They don't challenge the government. They don't challenge power. We're supposed to challenge the government. That's the role of the media.
Components that corrupt our politicians, I think, also corrupt mainstream media. It's really difficult for cable outlets to talk about things like income inequality, wealth inequality, when the advertisers that are funding their shows are the same corporations that want to ensure that the same system continues. People watch digital media or new media, they get a completely different message. They focus on the issues that matter or resonate more with the constituency. We need to know one thing. Is the corporate media incompetent?
Corporate media, I can't hear you. Establishment press, where are you? I can't hear you. But the media's position I am clear on. Everything is pro-war, so everything is just framed that way. In this case, I mean, war is inevitable, right? I mean, the defense contractors should get a couple more $1 trillion.
You ready for the stunning results? Only 6% of people say they have a great deal of confidence in the press. Wakey, wakey, okay? Progressives don't like the media either. You know why? It's the corporate media. Corporate media sounds like a conspiracy. Wait. Who owns you? Multi-billion-dollar corporations, public corporations. I can't think we're corporate media because corporations own us. Yeah, that's how it works.
Join the Dragon Squad by becoming a YouTube channel member. Click the join button below or sign up on tyt.com/join to get access to fun emojis, a member-only chat, exclusive Shop TYT designs, ad-free watching, and so many other amazing perks. Plus, you get bragging rights for being part of the coolest community on the internet and help us drive real positive change in the world. The Dragon Squad awaits, so join today.
I did everything right and they indicted me.
Why are you crying?
Welcome back to the show. Anna Kasparian and Mark Thompson with you.
Woohoo! It's so great to see my TYT brothers and sisters. Love it.
Host of the Mark Thompson Show on YouTube. Check it out. Subscribe if you haven't already.
Thank you.
How have you been?
It's been great. It's been fun. I love this YouTube universe. It's a whole different thing, you know?
Do you?
Yeah. Well, it's a lot of work. I love it more some days than others, but it's really fun. This is great. This is like a vacation compared to the everyday stuff that I do. Because you guys just
you must have a tough life.
Yeah.
If this is a
Not a vacation for you. It's a vacation for me to be able to come in and see everybody. Yeah.
Fair. All right, I wanted to read a quick comment. Curious if you've heard about this because I haven't seen anything about it in the news yet. So TMC Covey writes in and says, "Hello, Anna from Northern California. We're threatened by a fire that is 50,000 acres. We are covered in ash. Day 6, no power or internet. No state of emergency from Newsom, our wonderful governor." I say that sarcastically, can't stand him. Spread the word, TYT fam. Get the gov to do his job.
This is way in Northern California, right? Toward the Oregon border, I think. Is that right?
I'm not sure. This is the first time I'm hearing about it.
Yeah.
Have you heard of it?
I heard of it, but I wasn't. I thought there'd be more news of it. I think there is sort of a news shadow around this thing.
There's so much going on, and I think everyone is hyper focused on the Trump indictments and stuff like that, and Trump the debate.
Hawaii. I mean, these are. You're right. It's easy to get crowded out, especially if it's a generally rural area. So, without their population center involved. Anyway, that's really worth following up on.
Yeah, so thank you for writing in, and I promise you that we'll look into the story and see if we can do some coverage on it tomorrow. But for now, I want to talk a little bit about an incredible ProPublica investigation in regard to wage theft in the state of New York. And this is a story that really combines the issues that we have with our members of Congress failing to pass comprehensive immigration reform, and how undocumented immigrants are really being exploited and their wages are being stolen by various employers, in this case specifically in New York. So let's get into it.
U.S. Secretary of Labor Marty Walsh told us his wage and hour division is inundated with tens of thousands of complaints each year.
What do you say to people who've been waiting years to get wages that are owed to them, that have been stolen from them?
I would just say hang in there. I mean, our job is to do as quickly as we can to recoup the wages and the money that you're owed. And we're going to continue to fight for you every single day.
Lobbyists who oppose changing federal wage theft law argue it would hurt businesses and benefit trial lawyers more than employees.
We have to extract serious penalties if they are stealing money that is legally owed to a worker.
How hopeful are you that this legislation will get the support it needs to become law?
It's going to be difficult. It is going to be difficult.
For now, it remains largely up to the employee to monitor pay and fight for what's owed.
And that is a problem because under this current system, employers aren't getting any kind of message. And a new investigation by ProPublica in the state of New York has discovered that employees have been experiencing wage theft to a pretty severe extent. So their investigation uncovered that from 2017 to 2021, federal and state investigators found over 13,000 cases of wage theft in the state of New York alone. And those 13,000 cases affected approximately 127,000 workers. And according to ProPublica's report, those thousands of workers had over $203 million stolen from them during those 5 years alone. So how do these New York employers steal all that money? They do it in all sorts of like shady ways. For instance, if you work at a restaurant and some of the dishes broke during your shift, some of these employers will force the employees to pay for the broken dishes, stuff like that. And there are a lot of reasons why businesses can get away with wage theft, but today we're gonna focus on one in particular. So in New York, immigrants make up a massive portion of the state's workforce, especially when it comes to the restaurant industry. More than 60% of restaurant workers living in New York City are immigrants, according to a 2020 study by the New York State Comptroller's Office. Federal and state investigators determined that more than $52 million had been stolen from people working in restaurants, more than any other industry in New York, accounting for more than 25% of all reported wage theft. And in their piece on wage theft, ProPublica tells the story of one worker, Marcelino Zapoteco, who is an undocumented immigrant from Mexico who worked at a restaurant known as Brioso. Now, Brioso's co-owner, a man by the name of Pietro DiMaggio, deducted 5% of the workers' tips to pay for the computer system, whatever that means. I mean, you're the one running the business, you pay for those things, right? You pay for the computer system. Sometimes he would take even more. DiMaggio would also make his workers pay for broken plates and also for their own uniforms. But DiMaggio would also weaponize his employees' immigration status to essentially prevent them from reporting the abuse and mistreatment. When one of DiMaggio's employees complained about stolen tips, for instance, DiMaggio responded by threatening to report the employee to the immigration authorities, slamming tables, and then firing him. And the state investigator who worked on Zapoteco's case wrote the following. Mr. DiMaggio would make statements to the Hispanic employees such as, quote, "I'll personally make sure that you all get sent back to Mexico," or "Thank God that Trump is doing everything possible to get you guys the F out of here," end quote. So this doesn't surprise me at all, Mark, because I've seen so many instances of undocumented immigrants getting abused in the workplace, and they feel that they have no way to defend themselves because if they go to the authorities, they're worried that they'll get deported.
And from an employer's standpoint, that's the magic of the setup, and that's why we really don't get any immigration reform, because all of these things are linked, and there's a gray economy that is fueled by those who are here illegally. Slaughterhouses are overwhelmingly staffed by people who are here illegally. Agricultural, the entire Central Valley of California and agricultural concerns are overwhelmingly staffed by those who are in the country illegally, and it gives the employers so much leverage, and it also allows them to get whatever product they're working on done at a much reduced rate for all the reasons that we're talking about. You don't have to pay the same wages. So it's despicable, it's awful, because it's terribly difficult work, sometimes grotesque work in the case of, let's say, the slaughterhouse, insanely difficult work in the case of those farm workers, and working in the back of a kitchen all night is no party either. And then at the end of that, to have wages stolen from you, it's just grotesque.
And think about what that also means for, so you have the undocumented immigrants who are getting abused, their wages are being stolen from them, and as they're being exploited, think about what it means for other Americans. So if you think, who cares, right? They're breaking laws, they're here illegally, I have no empathy for them, who cares? Okay, but this kind of treatment, the only thing that trickles down is mistreatment in work, right? And so this has an impact of pulling everyone in the workforce down. And in fact, this is something that's been studied by the Economic Policy Institute. They say, and I agree with this, that wages for all workers in a certain industry go down when some of them are unable to defend themselves against this kind of mistreatment at the workplace. A recent comprehensive study conducted by a number of prominent scholars for the National Academies of Sciences, Engineering, and Medicine found that levels of immigration have only very small impacts on wages and employment. However, in certain local labor markets and industries where a significant share of workers are migrants who do not have access to worker protections and basic labor rights, migrant workers' lack of rights makes it difficult for them to bargain effectively for decent wages, and their weak leverage spills over to undercut the leverage of US workers, i.e. citizens and immigrants who are lawful permanent residents. I mean, it makes all the sense in the world. That doesn't surprise me at all.
And it's systemic, so that just points up the fact that it is a system. It's a system of exploitation, and as a result, you see no interest in changing it. I mean, it's very hard, and even in that back and forth in the tape piece from ProPublica, you could see that those even who are committed to change have to reluctantly say it's not going to be easy.
Yeah, that video was actually from CBS News, which actually, to their credit, they also did a pretty good report just a month ago on wage theft that focused not just on New York, but wage theft in general in the country. But it's a huge problem. And I think this is also part of the reason why you see this effort to loosen child labor laws in the country. So rather than paying adults for this work, adults who, might be more willing to demand better pay, better treatment, they want to employ literal minors to do some of these jobs. In fact, Mark, we did a story a few weeks ago about a poultry processing plant that had illegally employed a minor who had immigrated here from Guatemala. There was some sort of accident and he died as a result of being there and on the job. And so this kind of stuff happens all the time. We cover these stories all the time. And even in that clip that we showed you where you have a Democratic lawmaker saying, no, we need to do something about this. We need steeper fines. They don't care about your fines because their practices bring in way more money and way more profit than your fines could. So here's the question. If we deal with habitual, shoplifters or individuals who are part of a shoplifting ring, like the case is made that they should spend time behind bars for what they're doing. In this case, we're talking about habitual thieves who literally steal money from the pockets of their own employees. Let's have a conversation about jail time. I think that would probably speak volumes.
That's such a great point because the shoplifting we're increasingly realizing is a criminal enterprise. It's much bigger than just gangs going in. It's not a bunch of 15-year-olds. And similarly here, by Anna's point, I think it's a good one. It's a criminal enterprise going on. It's a way of doing business. It's a way of systematically stealing. And something on a bigger level has to be done besides finding them.
100%. All right, we got to take a break. When we come back, we are going to give you an update on that tragic story out of California involving a store owner who was shot and killed by a bigot who was offended by her pride flag. And later in the show, I want to say we're going to lighten things up a little bit. I don't remember exactly how we're going to. Oh, yes. Fancy steak dinner with Donald Trump and
delicious.
Members of the media. Oh my God, I can't wait to share that with you.
Trolling at a dinner.
Out of control. Yeah. All right, come right back. Cypher writes in and says, I don't think I've seen Mark and Anna host together before. Just the two of us. I don't think we have.
It's true. I don't think we have. Just as a duo, I guess it would be.
You were on, what were you on recently that I was watching? I think it was Old School. And I got a little jealous. I'm like, what the hell? How come Mark doesn't do the show with me?
Hey, anytime. Put up the bat beam, kid. I'm here.
I love it. All right, let's get to. God, there's so many comments. Okay, let's go to our Twitch community. I haven't read Twitch comments in a little bit. Shiny984 subscribed for 25 months with the comment, 25 months. Thanks TYT and chat. Awiz91 subscribed for 36 months. Good Lord, 3 years. Hey yo, good TYT. Oh, go TYT, left is best. Civic Folly 86 writes in and says, is TYT streaming the debate or should I subscribe to Fox Nation? You can subscribe to whatever you'd like. Unfortunately, we can't stream the debate because of copyright issues. However, immediately after the debate wraps, we're gonna come on air and we're gonna give you the highlights and the analysis. So if you want, you can take a load off and avoid even having to watch the full debate. We'll give you the highlights. We'll give you the full coverage. But if you wanna subscribe to Fox Nation and throw your money away, by all means. I mean, it's your money.
Maybe they have a trial period, 48 hours and you can cancel before it's
right. They might, I don't know, but don't do it. Don't do it. Polar Bear Dragon subscribed for 24 months. Bezos Bucks 2 years. Glad I found TYT. We're glad you found us as well. Thank you for the comment. Brad Shaw Crew 1. The Fulton jail is allowing them to self-report their own height and weight. So what numbers will Trump give them for his height and weight? Maybe Brett, meaning Brett Ehrlich, can make a poll when we do Happy Half Hour. So Brett is actually gonna join us tonight for our debate coverage. And so I don't think he's gonna be doing Happy Half Hour, but obviously stay tuned because he will be here in the flesh doing coverage with us.
And there's major wagering, and of course, as to what his weight is gonna be, so.
Yeah.
I didn't realize they could self-report that. I mean, that makes it a more fun wager in a way.
It really does,
yeah.
It really does. Paper Dragon says, debate hype. Savage Lou, Texan here. I have no idea how we can take down these crooks that run the state. It just seems so intertwined at this point. I mean, Texas and the deregulations there really do make it easier for companies and corporations to get away with all sorts of terrible, terrible behavior. I mean, the Texas two-step, the fact that it's dubbed the Texas two-step, I mean, corporations essentially like doing the phony bankruptcy thing to avoid having to pay any settlement or deal with any liability for their actions. That's what they're engaging in. We've got YTP Renewed, who subscribed for 31 months. So if corporations are people, does that mean a corporation capable of splitting into multiple companies is the corporate equivalent of Twinrova? I don't know what that is. Do you know what that is?
No.
Huh. Maybe? All right, we gotta get back to the show. Welcome back to the show, everyone. Anna Kasparian and Mark Thompson with you. Just want to read a few comments in our super chat section, and thank you to everyone who's writing in. In the first hour, I covered a story having to do with the treatment of inmates and the awful health care that they were receiving from a private company known as Corizon. Someone wrote in about their own experience, not with Corizon, luckily, but with private health care in general. Mr. McStalkington says, my dad has cancer. They are charging him $800 for one pill. This is unfortunately a story that many people can relate to here in the United States. And I unfortunately just lost your comment. I'm sorry about that. Okay, there we go. How did we get convinced as a country that this is how our healthcare system should be? I don't think anyone is convinced other than the politicians who take donations from the private health insurance companies.
Yeah, there's an inevitability of the capitalism associated with the health industry. It's all set up to make money. And believe me, if you look in the developed world, we are looked at as the loser nation. I mean, if you talk to anyone who's coming from any developed country, they just can't believe our healthcare system and how it bleeds the public dry. That's if you can even afford to be bled dry at $800 a pill.
Exactly. All right, well, let's move on to an update on a terrible story that we covered earlier today. The identity of the man who shot and killed an LGBTQ advocate and store owner in California has been released by the San Bernardino County Sheriff's Department. Now, 66-year-old Lori Carleton was killed in front of her store earlier this week after a guy was offended that she was flying a rainbow flag, the pride flag, in front of her business. Now, the suspected killer, who reportedly was shot after police found him following his crime of shooting and killing an innocent woman in front of her store. He was identified as 27-year-old Travis Ikaguchi, and that's according to the sheriff, Shannon Dickus, and what was said during the press conference identifying this individual. I want to show you a video of that press conference. We'll give you more details.
Investigators determined prior to the shooting that Ikaguchi tore down a pride or rainbow flag that was hanging in front of the Magpie store and yelled many homophobic slurs toward Carleton. Carlton, who worked at Magpie, confronted Ikeguchi, and during the confirmation, Ikeguchi shot and killed Carlton.
NBC's Maggie Vespa spoke to a friend and neighboring store owner about that moment.
Basically screamed, "Lori's been shot. Close your door. He might still be out there." And I said, "Oh my gosh, is she okay?" And she said, "No, I think they're saying she's been killed."
So Ikeguchi, who lived in the area, Cedar Glen, which is in like the Lake Arrowhead area, had a history of posting hateful content, which is unsurprising to me, and that's according to the sheriff, adding that his family had reported him missing the day prior. He shot Carlton with a semi-automatic handgun, which was not registered to him, and he did not have a concealed carry license. Mind you, we're talking about California. Concealed carry licenses are impossible to get. So that part didn't surprise me either. And a review of his social media accounts on Twitter and on the right-wing social media network Gab show that he had really fully embraced a wide range of conspiracy theories. He had bought into a lot of the fear mongering about the LGBT community. He claimed the 9/11 attacks were staged, so maybe he's a friend of Vivek Ramaswamy, who knows. He suggested that former First Lady Michelle Obama is a man, and he denied climate change. He also posted content opposing gun control measures, not that he would even follow those gun control measures, right? And he retweeted many posts talking about biblical prophecies and the end times. And again, this happened in California, which many people like to think of as a deeply blue state. And in the major cities, it is pretty blue, but there are parts of California that are not so blue. So it's a giant state. Don't make the mistake of thinking that every part of it and every voter here is left wing. But on top of that, Mark, we live in a climate right now where everyone seems to be upping the ante when it comes to their political views. You see it on the right when it comes to the fear mongering, the scaremongering about the LGBT community. And if someone is, I don't know anything about this man's mental health, right? But just broadly speaking, when you're also dealing with a situation in which many people are struggling with mental health issues, and then you have members of the media kind of like egging on, this climate of rage. It's just a terrible situation. I just wish people would stop and consider the impact it's having on innocent people and their lives.
Sadly, there is an economic incentive for many of these media figures to whip up the hate, to amp up the rhetoric, and this is the result of amped up rhetoric. Yeah, we don't know his situation mentally, but clearly he is more easily triggered, and he was hip deep in all kinds of hate sites and hate verbiage, and he took out this hate on this, by all measures, one of the most remarkable women. I think she had 9 children, and it was a blended family, and she was just, the entire community mourning her loss in such a substantial way. And this guy is out there in this media environment that Anna describes, I think accurately, where the rhetoric has become so intense, so impassioned, so anti-woke, so anti-LGBTQ. You end up in this place where you really feel as though, wow, they're the enemy. Whoever, fill in the blank there. Now, as I say, this guy, he was anti-Semitic sites and racist sites and all the rest. So he had a mouthful of it all. But I think within the environment, the anti-wokeism, the anti-whateverism is ultimately leading to what you describe as sort of this amped up kind of result, which is oftentimes violence. It's sadly the result of the rhetoric, I believe.
Yeah, and look, just yesterday we did a story that talked about political violence and the views in regard to the use of political violence on both sides. And what was, I mean, honestly, look, I consume a lot of media, and I think it would be a mistake to think that it's just one side that's using language that should be toned down a little bit. And you can see exactly what I'm referring to as it translates to the percentage of Democratic voters who are now saying, maybe in some cases political violence is necessary. No, it's not necessary. It is counterproductive. It does not help you advance any of your political goals whatsoever. It is stupid. The idea that people think that they can accomplish their political goals through violence. No, you're not supposed to do that in a democracy where we're supposed to have a democratic process in place. We're supposed to allow for free expression, debate. That's the way you hash out your differences, not through violence. Anyway.
And it's one of the reasons that people come to America, because there is this sort of freedom of an exchange of ideas that you don't find elsewhere often. I mean, increasingly, this is not the place that is less than scary. Everybody's got a gun. Everybody's ready to, take arms up against the state. I mean, I'm overstating it to make a point, but this is a far more violent nation and a far less tolerant nation than it was even 15 years ago.
Totally agree, and it's depressing to see it that way. All right, we gotta take a break. When we come back, let's have a little bit of fun, kind of. I'm gonna go after the media because of their close ties to Trump, especially right now. But more importantly, man, Trump really knows how to take digs at Ron DeSantis. Curious to see if he's gonna start focusing on Ramaswamy since he's rising in the polls a little bit. But nonetheless, let's take a break. When we come back, I'll share that story and more. Purple Pegasus 2531 writes in regard to our wage theft story. And get a load of this. Hey Anna and yay Mark. Not yay Anna, but yay Mark. I see you. I see you. I'm just kidding. 2 of 3 places I've worked had class action suits for wage theft. The 3rd overworked my coworker because the owner was sponsoring his green card. This affects blue and white collar workers. Absolutely. You're so right about that. Uplifting Depression writes in and says, John Gotti got the last laugh. I don't know. I don't know what that was a reference to. To what?
Mob.
Oh, mob. That's right. Okay. Probably the first hour story about Donald Trump and his co-conspirators. Okay. Higalik writes in and says, wanted to highlight this. Would be great if you considered covering this. Germany passed a law for self-determination pertaining to gender and first name. A comparison would be appreciated. All right, we've got Alex writing in saying, getting paid $100,000 to attend dinner with Trump and Rudy is insane. Wait, you have to pay to attend? I know, it's amazing. Like, who would do that?
Yeah, it's $200,000 if you want to leave early, right?
True. It's not true, but it should be true. Diana Murray says, so if we all agree that Trump not paying legal fees of his co-conspirators so they won't talk, can the charges include witness tampering if he does? That's a really good point. I don't know. But look, I went way too long with that story, but I wanted to make one other point. I'll make it now. Remember, there was an attorney representing one of Trump's employees in the classified documents case, and that Trump-funded employee ended up lying about the surveillance or the evidence tampering. And then once he found out, oh, I'm now being investigated for, lying under oath or whatever, giving false statements, he switched attorneys to a public defender and decided to take back his previous testimony. I share that with you to say, be careful what you wish for. A Trump-backed lawyer might actually give you really bad legal advice and actually further implicate you in the investigation, in the case. So just something to think about. All right, we've got Samantha Toder, mugshots. Oh, mug, shot, shots, everybody. I like that. Smell What Casper Is Cooking writes in and says, when is, we gotta go. When it comes to those who have been indicted in the attempt to overturn the 2020 presidential election, one name has not really come up, and that's Mike Lindell. One of our viewers writes in saying, smell what Casper is cooking. That's the person who wrote in. When is Mike Pillow being indicted? Didn't he try to help Trump steal the election too with money, if nothing else? Stick them all in prison. So Mike Lindell really, yes, he did the press interviews, and I think he genuinely did believe that the election was stolen from Trump. The guy is not all there, I'll just put it that way. But in terms of like taking substantive actions in attempting to overturn the election, like installing fake electors and all, I don't think he was involved in that, so that's probably why he hasn't been indicted. But I kind of feel, I don't know, don't get me wrong, I'm not a fan of Mike Lindell at all. But there's a part of me that feels kind of bad for him because I feel like he was totally manipulated and used.
Yeah, I get what you're saying. And he's also cartoonish, so it's very easy to kind of let him off the hook. But he was perpetrating he was spreading the really dangerous lie. And but Anna's so right. I mean, I think when you talk about the fact that, we see him on television all the time, and we just, not to spend too much time on this, but quickly, he was doing a lot of media, as Anna says. So he's showing up to every place with a microphone and a camera. And so we have a sense that he's kind of an insider. And then he even was a guest at the White House numerous times. And so you start to think that of him as a kind of in Trump's constellation of people from an official standpoint, but that never really was what he was. True. He was always a private citizen. And you're allowed to blow millions of dollars and go to court and try to make cases if you're a private citizen and never get
millions of dollars on this. Yeah. God, like, this is the bleeding heart part of me. I'm sorry. I wish it didn't exist, but it exists, and I feel bad for the guy because he was totally manipulated. Anyway, all right. Let's move on. Let's talk about something lighter, I guess, although there are some media and press implications here that bother me. So, prominent members of the press were treated to a Trump campaign dinner last night. Fancy steak dinner. And while there were some hilarious digs at Ron DeSantis, I do think it's a problem when prominent members of the media are whining and dining with Donald Trump, or any politician for that matter. So look, we'll get to that in just a moment, but here are the details. Politico led its so-called playbook newsletter with details about the dinner earlier today. Here's what they wrote. Spotted in Milwaukee, Team Trump whining and dining with a number of top reporters at a steakhouse called Rare. Wow, groundbreaking name. Really smart, real creative name there. And passing out pudding snack packs, a swipe at Ron DeSantis's pudding fingers story, as well as debate bingo cards to troll the Florida governor. Squares included dismisses polls, wipes snot, red ears, which is hilarious, DeSantis, flip-flops on Social Security again, woke, and pudding mention. So I want to show you what the dessert looked like, which was a snack pack, okay, of pudding. Wow. And then there you have the bingo card that they also passed out to the press. And if you're wondering what that's a reference to, it's this allegation that Ron DeSantis likes to eat chocolate pudding with his fingers. And Donald Trump even exploited that for a campaign ad. I want to show you that ad. I'm sure you've seen it already, but it's fun. Let's take a look.
Ron DeSantis loves sticking his fingers where they don't belong. And we're not just talking about pudding. DeSantis has his dirty fingers all over senior entitlements, like cutting Medicare, slashing Social Security, even raising our retirement age. Tell Ron DeSantis to keep his pudding fingers off our money. Oh, and somebody get this man a spoon.
Now, it's unknown if the pudding at this fancy dinner came with a spoon or if guests had to use their fingers. But what say you, Mark?
I hate to say it, but it's a pretty cool way to troll somebody.
It is.
I mean,
he knows how to troll. He's like troller in chief, honestly.
Yeah, the dude is the king troller. I mean, I don't know if that's literally his idea, the bingo card, but whoever on his team, they all think the same way as Trump trollicious assistants might. Anyway, I love the bingo card. I even like the spot. I mean, I hate to say it, but I think it's effective in making the points that Trump wants to make.
Oh, the spot is perfect.
Yeah.
I mean, look, again, taking the politics out of it completely.
Exactly.
All right, as an individual who's judging it in an unbiased way, whether it's politically effective or not, it's politically effective. Like, Trump has been so good at taking digs at Ron DeSantis, and Ron DeSantis is totally discombobulated.
Well, Ron DeSantis, and this is what I think we'll find out in the debates tonight, he's not charismatic, he's not a dynamic individual, so he struggles, and he's also not communicating any kind of, I can tell, a policy that people are particularly receptive to. So I don't know where the guy's getting traction. And of course he is losing money and losing funding, et cetera. But anyway, as a pure trolling move, that was great. I too hate to see, the Dana Bashes of the world, whoever was at that dinner, I hate to see them sucked into that whole scene. You look up to some of these members of the press, you want them to keep at least to some degree of objectivity. And the fact that they're there at these dinners, I don't know. It has a bad smell about it.
Yeah, I agree. So among the members of the media who were there was Dana Bash, Shane Goldmacher, who actually, I had a tweet of his in a story today. So I know that he's a, national politics correspondent for the New York Times. You have Kristen Welker, Bob Costa, Finn Gomez, Dasha Burns, Rachel Scott, Rick Klein, like all of these pretty big name, political reporters, David Chalian. I guess there are no ethics left, right?
Well,
like journalistic ethics, I remember, like it's interesting because when I was in school, I remember that particular class being the most interesting, and I really took what I learned there to heart. And I feel like a sucker because I feel like no one took it to heart.
I think that you find, and that's why journalism ethics classes are interesting. There are a lot of different situations where you lose the ethics in sort of the fog of the moment. And here's what they would say. They would say, well, we want relationships with these people. We can still be objective about these people, politicians and others. And they would say, and when I want to get my call returned, I'll get it returned. If I go, I can't do that, I can't attend these dinners, I'm less likely. Now, I agree with you, Anna. I think there are other ways to develop those relationships. Those relationships have been developed through the years. Sources and major political figures, you can connect with them in other ways. You don't have to attend this dinner, which is essentially set up to troll one candidate. But that's, I think that's the long and the short of it.
Yeah, look, if you're going to sacrifice journalistic ethics for access, that's not a good defense. Like, I had to sacrifice my journalistic ethics because I wanted access to Donald Trump. By the way, you're not supposed to accept gifts.
Right.
And a steak dinner is considered a gift. Like, are you guys insane? But like, this is the thing. They don't understand. This is the thing that always like amazes me. That these institutions, these legacy media outlets and platforms, like they don't understand why the public doesn't trust them. This is the kind of stuff that leads to distrust. You can cover political subjects without having access to the political subjects.
Yeah, again, they would say, well, we want this connection. But I agree with you. It's one of the reasons I don't like the White House Correspondents' Dinner. I've never liked it. I just feel like that is it's a party and it makes me uncomfortable, even though it's probably less damning, that situation, than the dinner that we're telling you about that just went down. Because at least there, you're with your table of colleagues, and you're not force-fed some kind of crap. I agree with you. I think that many of these journalists have lost their way on this kind of thing, but I'm not sure in the end it'll really matter, Anna. I mean, for these people, these are, I think the cake is baked on a lot of the names that you've just said.
Yeah, and it's not just Trump that's there. You have like Jason Miller as well. It's just.
Yeah, the people carrying the water for Trump and making the Trump argument over and over and over again. Right, it's tough. It's tough to conceive that you wouldn't get sucked into that somehow, even if it just means you're softening on your coverage.
Exactly. All right, let's end the show with something entirely different, something that's very important to anyone considering a dog. The state you live in might persuade you against having a dog as a pet, because apparently some states are more expensive for dog ownership than others, much more expensive. So, a new study indicates that the Golden State, California, tops the list as the most expensive state in the country to own a dog as a pet. Now, the new study by MarketWatch Guides calculated that the average cost for a Labrador Retriever, which apparently is still the most popular dog breed in America, assuming that it lives up to 11 years old, it's just too expensive to do in California. I disagree. I think that if you do a cost-benefit analysis, the benefits outweigh the cost significantly. And I think that they might be exaggerating some of these numbers, but nonetheless, I'll give you the details. So California was rated as the most expensive with an estimated lifetime cost of $35,452, assuming that the dog lives to about 11 years. According to the study, California has the highest price tag for pet insurance, veterinary care, and dog food. And these expenses include upfront costs as well, such as vaccines, supplies, spay and neutering the pet, medicine, annual fees such as insurance, grooming, food, checkups. Look, this is what I do. I groom my own dog. Sometimes he looks a little funny after I do it. He kind of hates it, but I do save the money. Right? Like there are ways to make this work. You know what I'm saying? There are ways to make, look at him, he's beautiful. Beautiful dog, beautiful dog.
Please don't groom me, mama. That's what he's saying.
Look at how perfect he is. No, but you live in California. You are a giant animal advocate.
Yeah.
Do you have dogs? I don't know if
No, I've had dogs. I don't have them right now. We have cats right now, so it would be a little, and they're older senior cats, so it would be a little destabilizing. But to the point, veterinary costs are real and they're really high. And so people get pet insurance, and pet insurance is really high. I mean, it can be really expensive. So I get the problem. Sure, if you're asking me cost benefit, the benefits are immense. I mean, the benefits are emotional. I mean, you might live longer, you might live happier.
Totally.
I mean, there are all of these studies that indicate, being around a dog or a cat. I mean, any kind of pet ownership where I guess you have that contact, it can so enrich your life to have physiological benefits. That said, it can cost money. Now there are low-cost veterinary services. I'm involved in a couple of shelters that offer it. So
that's amazing.
Yeah, you should look into that. If you're in Southern California, I can tell you where they are.
In fact, there are services. I know about this because my mom took advantage of it. There are services that will spay or neuter your dog for free.
Sure.
Because it is expensive. Okay, when I adopted Charlie, we had to pay $400 up front because of the fact that they fixed him, before they adopted him to us, and they wanted us to take care of those, those costs, which I was happy to do. But if you can't afford it, there are services. You just do a little research. I'm sure you'll find something. I want to give you the list of the top 5 states where it is considered the most expensive to own a dog. As I mentioned, California comes at number 1, but New York follows at $34,248, followed by Massachusetts at $33,318. Again, this is over the course of 11 years. On average, New Jersey, $32,947, and Washington, $32,894.
Again, they add everything in there, right? That's
they do.
Food. It's it's veterinary costs over the life of the creature. But I don't know. And those are modest differences between those top five.
They are modest differences. Now, if you want to compare those states to the 5 least expensive states, there is a big difference. So Oklahoma is the most affordable state to own a dog. $24,855, followed by Mississippi, Indiana, Nebraska, and Louisiana. And look, there are some caveats here. So there are a few flaws in that some states don't really report the data necessary for them to include them in this study. So for instance, Alaska, North Dakota, South Dakota, or Hawaii, they're very expensive. Hawaii is a very expensive state to live in, but they didn't have the data necessary for them to be included in this study. And also the study doesn't include certain cost factors such as due to a lack of necessity or wide range data. That includes adoption costs, which can be expensive, apartment fees, which I've had to pay, lots of stuff included. Anyway, we're gonna take a break for our members and do a bonus episode in just a few minutes. For everyone else though, have a good night. Come back for our debate coverage immediately after the Fox News GOP primary debate. We'll see you there.
Our audience has given us everything, so we couldn't be more connected. When we first started, people would start giving us directions and say, okay, the mics are too large, move them. Turn them into lav mics. I mean, they were incredible. And then one guy walked in and gave us a really expensive switcher and said, you guys need this, and walked out. Okay, it's amazing. They helped us build a studio. They did a $2 million funding campaign for us. And so they really are us. We do this show together to the point where some of our hosts are even former listeners. So when we say that the audience is part of TYT, we really mean it.
I think what the audience also appreciates is especially if they're members, they really get an inside look into who we are, our personal lives, what drives and motivates us.